Hi, and welcome to All Points Bulletin on therapycable.com, where we discuss hot and sometimes controversial issues that are affecting our community. Today, I'd like to welcome my guest, Michael Oden. Michael works for the Los Angeles County Probation Department and has over 15 years of experience. He's interviewed tens of thousands of probationers and has written a book called When Nobody's Home. When Nobody's Home has a lot to do with understanding the effects of fatherless children. So, Michael, welcome. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to come in here and talk about your book. And I'll have to say, this is a great read. A lot of really tragic stories, but really a great read. And to let you know, I've also used a couple of your case studies in some of my classes as well when I was teaching child abuse and understanding the dynamics of family. So it really came in handy to help my students understand some of the trials and tribulations of what it's like to grow up, fatherless and, drug addiction and being in the criminal justice system. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, Michael, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about, and I realize that your clients was kind of the platform for you writing this book, but can you just share a little bit about what inspired you to write it or feeling the need to write this?
Sure. I was working on some behavioral techniques, while I was a probation officer, and I really wanted to understand why an individual would use drugs for a long period of time or alcohol extensively.
Right.
To the point where they would destroy their lives. So I decided to go behind the scenes to see, what was the cause of the drug use. And that's what the book is about. It's not the drug use, it's why they started in the first place. And what the book does is it gives you answers as to, how that behavior came along.
Interesting. And I know when we've met before or discussed things, we also talk about the missing piece. And I think the missing piece is the key issue, whether it's juvenile people on juvenile probation or adult probation. Can you explain a little bit about the missing piece or the lack of family that really has a strong effect on the people that you work with?
Sure. One of the things I discovered over my 10,000 interviews and thousands of hours of talking to these clients was this. They were missing their father. And that was the common denominator. In juvenile hall, in county jail, and state prison, every person I've spoke with, all my guys on probation, everyone I spoke with was missing a father. And the impact of not having a father, especially for a boy, is really critical. And what happens is the boy does not get the tools or the social development to know what it's like to be a man, to learn how to plan things, become responsible, take care of himself, just to grow into that manhood. And most of my clients have been stuck, hence the term man-child.
When you mean most of your clients have been stuck, just kind of elaborate on that a little bit. I mean, I know what you're saying, that it's almost like you're stuck in a piece of time that you can't get past. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that means?
Right. Usually in a home, there are certain events that happen, and we'll call them tragic events, childhood trauma. And that event is the event that they will see and experience, and they will shut down emotionally and socially to save themselves in order to survive another day in the home. So what happens is their body grows chronologically, but emotionally their body stays stuck at that age that the event happened. So what they do is they try to navigate in the adult world with a child survival tactic.
So it's almost like they're stuck in their child life, even though that they are physically, by age size, that they are really an adult.
Right.
And I guess one of the other questions I have for you, too, is that as a probation officer, I think it's the struggle because I know your caseload is high and, you're almost required to be somewhat of a therapist, but you don't have a lot of time to spend with each individual, and especially because they're adults.
Right. Well, everybody's asked me that question. It's hard to be a PO. I say, no, it's not. I love it. I love every minute of it because I'm helping somebody. I'm getting them to see how their past impacted their behavior and how they can change it. All right.
I'm just going to stop you. Can you walk me through that process of what that looks like?
Sure. So when I get a client, I sit them down. And one of the things I want them to understand is I'm going to get them to understand their life. I'm going to make sense of everything they have done. So the first question I would ask is this. Do you understand why you use drugs in the first place? All right. And then they'll give me, because I wanted to. We know that, but why'd you want to? And then we'll go, boom, something happened. So let's say they say, well, I saw my daddy hit mommy. Right? And then that was the moment when daddy never came home. And those moments are the moments where the child starts looking for, how do I deal with this tragic or traumatic experience?
Right.
When do drugs come into place? Who do I seek it from outside the house? And they'll try to get those connections met with other people outside the home. They're homies, for lack of a better word.
So whether it be a gang member or kids, drugs and alcohol, or just finding a replacement to what they don't
That's
have.
exactly, we'll find a replacement. That's exactly what it is. And they'll say, well, they were bad kids. No, they're not. They were the right kids, otherwise you would not have spent time with them.
Right.
Because you're getting something out of it.
Right.
They're getting a need met. And that's what I get my clients to see, is they're getting a need met by using drugs excessively.
So bringing them back to some of their earlyhood trauma and allowing them to process what they've been through, you feel that that's really the kind of the awakening point where you start to see the change in your clients?
Oh, it's a huge awakening. It's probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences they'll ever encounter, because they never really want to look at that. You have the fantasy dad or caregiver, and you have the reality. Most of the people will stick to the fantasy that my dad's a good guy, he provided for us, he was there. Then I really get down to asking the questions about, was he really there? And how did you really relate? What did he say to you? And we sit down and have that session. Then they actually have to look at the truth. And that's what I'm trying to get these guys to understand, my clients. What is the truth? The truth is that he wasn't. And that's really difficult for them to process.
Right. And having taught probation classes as well, I mean, one of the things that I think it was a common struggle for a lot of probation officers is, how do they see that fantasy dad? How can you, again, I mean, I think it really triggers a lot of abandonment issues, a lot of issues of, what's so bad about me that my dad or my mom wasn't a quality parent.
Oh, that's huge.
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that always comes up. Why did he leave me? Why wasn't he there? And one of the things I tell my guys, or one of the responses I give them, is this: maybe he didn't know how to be there.
Wow, yeah, that's a very powerful statement, and I think sometimes it's really hard for kids to understand that it wasn't their fault.
Right. That's big. When they can understand that, that's 50% of the emotional burden that they've been carrying.
Right.
Or more.
Right.
Now they can breathe, and now they can loosen up and move forward and give themselves a break, but also give their father a break, or the caretaker who wasn't there. Because if you don't know how to take care of a child, and because they weren't taught that, then they didn't know. So they're not the good parent or the bad parent. They're the parent who just did not have the information to do so.
Right, and that, and again, I think it's somewhat hard, especially where you're so limited to the amount of time that you can spend, with each client or each, person on probation. I mean, that has always been a struggle, correct?
Well, I'll tell you what. I have hundreds of clients, and they come through the door, and one thing I've just done is I just spent time with each one as much as I could, and then on to the next one. Some may take an hour and a half, and my clients now know that if I can't see them and they'll have to wait an hour or so, it's because I'm helping somebody.
Right.
And that's what they really appreciate, because eventually we're not going to need to spend that much time anymore.
Would you say your caseload has a lot to do with addiction, drug and alcohol, and what have you? I mean, do you see a lot of that with your clients?
Yes. Most of my clients have been addicted to drugs and alcohol. Also thefts to support the drug and alcohol.
Right.
So they have petty theft crimes and things of that nature, burglary, and some other various others. But that's the main.
Would you also say that they have a history of whether it be child abuse or sexual abuse?
I've had sprinkles of that, and we've had to uncover that. Hence the drug use. And those are the ones that are really difficult, because we had to really look and see how their family dynamics impacted, the sexual abuse.
Right. We're going to take a quick break and have a word from our sponsor. And then when we come back, I want to get into how do we start replacing these negative images and allow people to see that there's something positive out there for them. So we'll be back in a moment.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to All Points Bulletin on therapycable.com. Michael, when we left off, we were talking about your clients being drug and alcohol addicted and how you kind of walked them through being successful by really looking at their past trauma and things that have happened to them to where they, I guess, are now. But I just want to fast forward a little bit and talk about, you've worked in both juvenile and adult probation. Can you share just a little bit about your experience working in juvenile? Because I know that they're really two different ways of having to work with people.
Well, to be fair, I must say juvenile is a lot more demanding. There's usually a 6-to-1 ratio from the probationer to all the people that surround that probationer, the adolescent.
Okay.
Parents, school counselors, church, things of that nature. So this is a lot, and when you have a child who's angry and a child who's misbehaving, we'll call it, and people don't have the tools how to handle that child,
right,
it makes it difficult for them to change and do something different, because a lot of times everybody's told what to do. They're told this, don't do this, don't do that, go to school, but no one's talking about the underlying emotion that drives them to behave a certain way. Now, what's interesting is I will get that client if he continues to do what he's doing 5-10 years down the road. Then I'll bring up where he was during his adolescent years and give him some understanding as to why he may be angry, he may be frustrated, and he made the decisions to join a gang, to use drugs, to skip school, or actually abuse his mother.
Right. And I'll have to say, from my experience working with juveniles on the law enforcement side, one of the hardest things is to get them to buy in, and you look at a probation contract and it says, attend school without incident, don't hang around with gang members. However, if I have no positive things to trade off on, how can you convince, whether it be a child or an adult, that there's something better out there when they've never seen that before?
Okay, watch this. When you tell a child not to do things, do something, ask the other question. Why do you think you do that? Why is the gang so important to you? What are you getting out of it? Otherwise, you wouldn't do it in the first place. Skipping school. In the long run, you're going to be harmed, and you're going to regret it when you're 20, 30 years old. In the short term, you're getting a need met. And the need may be acceptance from a group of people who are skipping. And also choice, because guess what? You get to have a say in that matter,
right,
about not going to school. And you're bucking authority, as it were, because you have all these authority figures telling you what to do. Well, if I skip school, guess what? I have a say in my life. It may be detrimental long term, but right now, I have a say.
So I guess part of what I hear you saying is that you almost have to have the person create their own action plan versus us saying, you have to go to school because, school will benefit you in the long run. But if they're not buying in, they almost have to create their own action plan that works for them. Yes,
you do. However, you do need support from the adult, in the sense that this is why school is important. Because if you don't, this is what happens. What do you think is important? And you put it on them. You always got to put everything on them so they can make the decision. And you give them 3 choices that will make a decision that will benefit them.
And opposed to how we've always done things,
right,
and just told them what to do.
Told them what to do. Boom, out comes the gavel. This is what you're going to do, or else you get punished.
Right.
And we know how that works.
Right.
That's right. The recidivism rate in prisons are 70%.
So I guess my question is too, that if you grow up not having positive role models in your life, where do you seek them out? How do we get kids to I mean, again, I know we have programs out there that provide mentorship, but I think in the long run, especially as they start to age out of the system, we really need to empower them to seek out their own type of role models. So how does that happen?
Well, first of all, again, I always start at the beginning. Something has to start from somewhere. So they need to see that they don't have a role model. Right. And they need to see that how that impacts them. Okay? Then once they're cognizant of that their main guy wasn't there to show them how to be a man, in this case, then maybe we could look to other people, in the community to visualize what a good role model is. Since they don't have their main guy, we also have to give that main guy a break, like we talked about last time, because, well, he doesn't know how to be there for you. So let's let him go and be at peace with it and accept the fact that he may not show up and that we have other people we can choose from.
So it's almost like we're giving the missing link a pass?
Yes.
And that does make sense. And I think that when we talked about the fantasy dad or even the fantasy mom, and it really does go both ways when it comes to parenthood. I think that's the hardest part, is that if we don't work on understanding what that fantasy looks like and replacing it with a positive role model,
Right.
we're never going to create that
Right.
cognitive change,
Right.
or that change that the negative behavior
Right.
as well. So, and again, I really do. I've always been appreciative of the work that probation officers do, because especially, and I don't mean especially in the juveniles, but I mean I've worked more on the juvenile side, and I think it's just such an important piece to keeping kids out of our juvenile system. I mean, I think that we know that, watching young kids who are arrested, who eventually age out into the adult system, we've missed the bar there.
We have. Not intentionally. It's just the fact that there's so much that goes on, raising a child, and parents may not have the skill. They may come from another country. They may not have the parenting class to show them certain techniques to raise children. And again, the big one is they may not know how to be there for their children.
Right.
And neglecting a child, they may not understand the impact of what it's like to neglect a child and what they're going to do with that. So they're doing the best they can with the limited resources that they have. If people were more aware of spending time with your child, so they can grow up and know that they're wanted, heard, and valued,
Right.
chances are they wouldn't do the behavior that's destructive that they're doing.
Right. So, and I guess that's important. When I read some of the stories in here, they all seem to have that similar. There's the tie-in. I mean, it's just unique to when you read it. It's like, my God, that they all have something
that missing piece of the puzzle of their life that would allow them to be, shall we say, at peace with themselves and who they are as people.
Yes, and that does that really makes sense when we think about long term. I just want to. What does success look like? I mean, I know, and this is part of the hard part, especially working in the criminal justice system. We balance our struggles on. We have failures and successes. So what does success look like? How do you measure success in some of your clients?
Well, I measure success by the initial part for me of success is this. When my client really accepts the fact that their caretaker wasn't there. That's success. If he can get that or she can get that their caretaker wasn't there, that means my client is able to move on in their life and not hold on to the fact that they were worthless or other beliefs that they created. And once they can move on, now they can believe they can accomplish things. School, which is a big one, getting a trade, liking themselves. If you like yourselves, you take care of yourself.
Right.
And if you do that, you're going to do things that are beneficial, and then we can go into another tangent about who you date. What kind of partner do you pick? Do you pick one like your dad or your mother, or do you pick one, I want a guy who's going to be nice to me because I deserve that? So those are other things that, as they say, kind of the trickle effect. But success means that they get it and they like themselves and they're ready to move on.
That must be an amazing feeling, though, especially when you work with some of your harder clients that, when you first see them, they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then all of a sudden when the pieces come together.
It is probably why I don't call my occupation or career work. To me, it is an adventure. It is a treat. I love it so much that I don't get tired. Seeing somebody change their life, doing something different that they never thought they could do, and becoming a different person brings me nothing but joy.
Yeah, and that's why I say that probation is definitely one of those valued positions within our criminal justice system. And just on that, and I appreciate you coming and sharing, and I will have to say that reading this book and sharing it with my students, one of the things that we debriefed afterwards is realizing that people that enter the criminal justice system have a story. They have trauma. They have things that they have to work through. And it really did. It not only opened my eyes by reading somebody else's trauma, but also my students. It was really a great discussion. I'll have to invite you next time. But I hope you know that I have been using your stories. But I will. I really want to bring you in to talk about firsthand about what that looks like.
Yes, I tell you, for you to say that right now really brings me joy. I really appreciate it because that's what the book is meant to do. It's meant to open up people's eyes to see what others have gone through, and maybe they can relate to some of the stories, so they can go, "Wow, that's me in that book," and these are the changes that I will need to make You know, or also it may give me some awareness about my behavior so I can change.
Right.
So that's great.
And again, I mean, I think that even using some of these stories will eventually create, more well-rounded police officers, probation officers, social workers, people that even work in mental health, because that's another,
that's
key
big.
piece of that
Yes.
as well. But anything else you want to add, Michael? I really do. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and also it really empowers me to hear that there is success out there, because I know that when we look at percentages and what have you, it becomes kind of concerning that we're not making a way in our criminal justice system. So
yeah, well, I thank you. I guess my last piece of information that I would like to say is that the book is designed to help people change their lives once they understand where they started from. And if they can do that, they have a great shot of changing their lives.
Very
so thank you
powerful.
for having me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for watching All Points Bulletin on therapycable.com.